UCSF technologies. I have an inclusive program that includes the business community, Berkeley and Stanford as well, so occasionally we start a company that comes out of someone else's technology. And the reason I'm here is I got in touch with One Traction and said, can I come to your conference? And they said, sure, and you're on the blockchain healthcare panel. So I am not the expert. Everything I've learned in the last 3 weeks and what I heard this morning. So it should be an interesting discussion with my colleagues. Please.
So hi, I'm Karen. I'm with BlockCypher, and we provide blockchain as a service. So that's for you, those of you who are entrepreneurs in the room. You want to get started on building out a blockchain application, you can start so right away and use our web services and infrastructure without having to set up your own nodes, get your own hardware services, people who can help you develop the blockchains. You can just start using our web services right away. The reason why we're involved with healthcare is because we've been working with blockchain startups such as Patientory and others who are developing blockchain applications around digital identity. And we've been working with the Ethereum Alliance. How many of you have heard of the Ethereum Alliance? Okay, a few of you. Okay, so we're part of the healthcare working group within the Ethereum Alliance and working with a number of pharma companies as well as other companies on issues such as counterfeit, digital identity, healthcare population data, and using blockchain.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. And so I think that's a good segue into our first topic of, what are some of the areas, or maybe pick one area that you can see that blockchain would add an advantage over existing technologies or existing infrastructure in the healthcare system, and then we could have those respond and piggyback on top. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
So I think one area we've been thinking about a lot recently is long-term care. I think there's a potential there for blockchain in terms of insurance. This is a big issue. Long-term care insurance is very expensive. There used to be a lot of people purchasing and selling long-term care, and now that's dwindled down. It's kind of being combined with life insurance benefits. It's a big issue, the tremendous aging population. It's one of the *1 issues clinically I deal with. Patients, either their family or themselves, are getting older, they're requiring more care, and they don't know how to pay for that. So I think there's an opportunity there for blockchain in terms of, cryptocurrency, some aspect of insurance contracts with long-term care.
Good to go next because then not so many areas are already taken. I will admit that when I was asked to join here, I also said to the organizers, I'm not one of those that believe blockchain is a solution for everything, and certainly not in healthcare. So a careful application is necessary, and some of the features come with some of the challenges, like what everybody's talking about, energy consumption and so on, which is certainly in some areas not ideally applicable. So you may have to look into hybrid solutions, taking some elements of blockchain, but not the whole thing, like it would be applied to cryptocurrencies. An area that I like to be considered for applications is in regulatory compliance. So for those of you who know FDA and Code of Federal Regulations, one thing that device manufacturers have to do is to provide, from beginning to end throughout the supply chain, device records so that they can also trace devices back in case there is ever a recall that is being necessary and that is laid on them. So now that data is of course being recorded right now, but there are some of the advantages of a blockchain, like not being able to alter it, having a good record, cannot be manipulated, and generally trusted would come into play quite nicely. And since this is a governmental area, it's a regulated area, it could also be imposed to use it in a certain way so that we would be able to roll it out industry-wide with appropriate measures.
Yeah, we have some actually challenges with counterfeiting, and that's actually applicable to all three of our businesses. So whether you talk about a fertilizer that gets kind of diluted down and then sold in Southern America, for example, that happens quite a bit, or whether you talk about just one of our drugs that has a Bayer logo and people counterfeit it and print the packaging and sell it. apart from the fact that this is, of course, you know, a loss in revenue and opportunity, but it's even more drastically, the bigger issue for us is actually that people then call us up because they see that this is a packaging of a beta drug, and they say it doesn't work. You know, this is like, what are you guys doing, right? And so then we have to prove that this is actually not a beta drug; it's a false one. And so blockchain, using blockchain in order to trace back to the origin of where the product came from is actually a big use case for us.
So I'm running a class right now called Startup 101. It's all team-based, and they go through and build basically pitch decks to describe their business model and so on. And one of my teams said, we have a blockchain application. I said, really? That's interesting, because I'm going to be at a blockchain conference. So what are you doing? And there are a couple of ER docs, and they said that medical credentialing is a big problem. You have to do it every year, and it takes a long time. You have to file all these records, and why not use a blockchain? And it seems like it's the perfect application, so we'll see where that goes.
And Karen, before you jump in, you know, you're kind of at the forefront of integrating some of this blockchain technology into applications and companies. But with any technology, there's always the adoption hurdle, and how not only to build it, but also for the user to integrate it into their systems. What do you like? How easy or complicated would it be to, you know, I guess replace existing infrastructure in a couple use cases?
Yeah, so I mean, that is a great question, and that's something that comes up quite a bit. One of the use cases we have been working on is digital identity or healthcare identity, and that was something we talked about in one of the last sessions, where people want to own their own identity, their own patient information, because it's ridiculous that we don't have, you know, control of that. And so one of the companies we're working with has a mobile application where you actually have your patient information on your phone. And the reason why this need came about is because there are hospitals that we're working with that had data breaches. And as a result of these data breaches, patients could not get into the hospital to be treated. They were actually turned away because the hospital couldn't identify them. Can you imagine you're sick, have some major issues, and you're turned away, you have to go to a different hospital because the hospital you should be going to can't identify who you are? So that's one of the reasons why this company is developing this healthcare identity application. Now, that is in itself controversial because I've done a lot of workshops for doctors and other healthcare providers who say, you know, hey, wait a minute, patients shouldn't have control of their identity. They don't know what it really means. You know, what about their patient data is going to tell me as a doctor? If they withhold certain pieces of information, how as a doctor can I actually treat them in the best way? And so there's still quite a bit of controversy in that area, but the premise is that because the blockchain allows you to be decentralized, allows patients to effectively own their own data, then you can have patients have control, have the ability to have a patient go to a hospital, even if they've gone through some data breach, and say, hey, this is who I am, and you can treat me. And so that's part of one of the things that we're working on, and specifically, going back to long care payments, we are helping to ensure that when a patient goes to a hospital, they're able to use this mobile app to make the co-payment at the same time. And so the hospital doesn't have to wait for certain payments to go through, which is in itself a process.
Yeah, maybe a quick comment to make it interactive. So I like the idea of patient identity, the people owning that for themselves, but maybe not go too far and not for everybody, not make it mandatory. Patients, of course, are very diverse, a very, very different group. I'm sure there's a large amount of patients that wants to be taken care of by the healthcare system and would reject a lot of responsibility on themselves. Specifically, and maybe that changes over time, the current generation of seniors, when we've worked a lot with Philips Lifeline, for example, for the real elderly, they really don't want a lot of responsibility because they're very afraid they will do something wrong, and they trust the healthcare system so far. Maybe that's naive, but too much on them could be a risk as well.
So I totally agree with that, and so what we've seen is really there's this decentralization spectrum, and that falls in line with the need to, or the appetite for giving up, certain freedoms, right? So if you are, in the US, the most libertarian, you will be the most decentralized, or on the farthest end of that decentralization spectrum. And for those of us who want to be taken care of by somebody else and who are willing to give up some of our freedoms for that, will be, on the other end. So it is a bit of a philosophical choice and a life choice. So, but definitely agree.
Just to add a couple of comments is, I think you have to always think about it, well, if we're starting from scratch, what would we do versus, kind of coming up against the system now. I think that's the biggest challenge in terms of healthcare IT infrastructure. EMR penetration was really horrible until the Affordable Care Act, and there were monetary incentives put in place to basically pay hospitals to implement electronic medical records. Outside of medicine, everybody's like, well, this makes sense. Why would everything be on paper? I finished my residency 13 years ago. I was writing paper charts. There was no reason that technologically that needed to be done. It was more kind of a structural reason. Things had to be top down. So this is the challenge, I think, with kind of all of these potential solutions is you're fighting an uphill, just speaking to the entrepreneurs in the audience, you will fight an uphill battle against, established interests. Kaiser has spent $1 billion+ on Epic, which is their very centralized EMR, right? Stanford has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on Epic. Epic has over 50% market share, and they're based on 1970s technology. So, this is the challenge. I'm not saying these are not good ideas and applications. It's just in terms of from the entrepreneur's perspective of actually, delivering a company and rolling it out. Same thing with credentialing. I remember I used to practice in Massachusetts, and I got my license in about 2 weeks. In California, it took me 6 months, right? And does that have anything to do with IT? Does it have anything to do with not having blockchain or having blockchain? No, it has to do with California had one person in the office, and they didn't have enough people, and the government didn't pay, they don't support that, and they require everybody to be fingerprinted, and I had to be fingerprinted like 5 times, and all of these things, whereas Massachusetts didn't have that. So this is the challenge when you look at the problems in healthcare. You have to say, well, how big of a problem it is. So you could get disagreement about how big of a problem the problems are that have been mentioned. But you also have to say, well, how easy is it for me to implement my whatever solution, blockchain or not? So that you just have to keep that in mind from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Healthcare is probably one of the most difficult, or if not the most difficult area to roll out any type of new solution.
To reinforce that, when I was going to answer what are the top 3 problems in healthcare, one of our questions, that's one of them, is that we are so resistant to change, and you literally have to wait for another generation to grow up, and this current generation of physicians getting trained, they know digital health, and they'll use it, but what's it going to take to get into the institution, to get the institution to adopt it, to get to actually change clinical practice? Those are all huge problems, and my entrepreneurs are very optimistic, and they come up with great ideas like credentialing, whatever, but that, they're going to look at what does it take for behavior change, and will it be accepted by institutions, and what will it take to get it accepted? So it's a tough road, and it should all happen, but it doesn't, and that's a real big problem in healthcare.
Well, to build on that, and I can only resonate that it's hard to get something new established. It's kind of like my day job. So, but there's good reasons for it as well, and you just have to be aware of certain dynamics. When you look at a prescription drug development, it's an average of 12 years of development time, and then you have 20 years of battery lifetime, which means that you have 8 years to recoup on your investment and to pay for the 99% that failed before. So it's huge business cases and billions of dollars that get invested and that you have to get paid back. So when we look at kind of like a rule of thumb for one of these big drug development investments, we say that every day that we can commercialize a drug more quickly is the equivalent of 500,000 to 1 million in revenue every day. So that means that if you delay something, you are not making yourself any friends, right? And on the contrary, if you work on something that can actually save a lot of time, the business case is huge, right away. So then it's just a matter of how do you actually show that, you know, and how do you channel it, funnel it into the pipeline. And so it's probably not a good idea to try to get on a process that's in the middle of developing a drug, but it's probably a good idea to funnel it into something that is an early stage development or something that runs in a redundant way. And that's actually the way that we have done it in many applications, not just blockchain topics, but in particular for blockchain. You know, when you think about these patient identification, that's a big topic for us when we talk about identifying patients for clinical trials, onboarding them, knowing whether they are already enrolled into a trial, which is a big issue, you know, and that's where there's quite a few applications around blockchain.
Right, yeah, so we have a number of colleagues who are in the pharma space, and we talked about, like you said, in the early trial period as a place where the blockchain could add a lot of impact. And like you were saying, with the credentialing, it's also low-hanging fruit for the reasons that you guys just described, right? There's very specific, tangible economic incentives. And in credentialing, we worked on another project where the doctors, wanted to get paid faster, right? So doctors changed offices, their addresses changed, and they couldn't get the payments, because their addresses changed. That was a big problem. And so if there was a way to have that information always updated, plus all the credentials along with it, then they would get paid faster, which is, a very clear win. But I totally agree. In looking at all these different applications for the blockchain, you have to start with what are the economic benefits and what are and how hard is it, to get done given all the parties that need to be involved.
Yeah, I was stunned by a statistic I came across that the CNR paid $30 billion to get EHRs adopted in this country. So they spent $30 billion over a long period of time. If that's what it takes to get adopted, there's a lot of stuff that's never going to happen. Let's hope it gets easier as we go along.
To add on to that, what both of you said, I think, I agree that I think if you're, making a cost savings argument and something that's revenue generating, that's powerful, I think there's a lot of movement toward healthcare, toward, value-based care. But still, the best way to get paid in medicine is to follow money where there is money existing. For example, with the payments, right? That money is there. That's revenue generating, as opposed to cost savings. I think healthcare is still, as an industry as a whole, the mentality is how do we generate new revenue. MedTech is a classic example, right? What's the reimbursement, right? What's the reimbursement? Pretty much the whole medtech industry has been based upon you having a specific code to get paid for something. It's much harder to argue, and this is part of the reason why EMRs are, were slow to roll out until there was money associated with them, that even though you may be saving some cost, nobody's paying you for that. So, and also everybody who is in healthcare, in terms of improving the way healthcare works, right? Healthcare works really inefficiently. Everywhere is different. Stanford works very differently than UCSF. You're kind of implementing these solutions that are supposed to fit everywhere, but God, healthcare is very different in every part of this country. In the South, it's very different. Not just structurally, but also how the payments, the insurance mixes are different parts of the country. So it's a harder road to travel, just purely cost savings. But if you can bring in more revenue, that's I think a little easier road to travel as an entrepreneur.
I don't want to run out of time, so I might open up for the audience if they have any questions, and if you don't have any questions, I have a question. Any questions from the audience?
So it's been a while since we are talking about disruption in the healthcare space, right? And of course, Epic has done some good work. but where do you see it going in the next 5 years? I mean, like, will we have that total entrepreneurial efficiency into the healthcare space? I know there's challenges, like you said, Brian. It's about the people you know and all that stuff, but where do you see it going, and when will it be solved? What gives?
I'll take a first shot at that. I think in terms of healthcare IT specifically, I think it's going to be driven a lot top down at this point, rather as opposed to bottom up. It's hard to get for companies to get traction. I think a lot of kind of interesting work is being done that's driven by big organizations because of the consolidation of healthcare. I mean, just for example, one benefit of Epic, I mean, people will argue about the benefits of Epic, but one benefit of Epic is I can, just today I opened up a patient's chart and I could see their chart everywhere they've ever been that has Epic, right? I mean, you think that would be natural, yeah, but even without blockchain, right? I can do that, and Epic, of course, wants to control that. So this is part of the reason. It's probably a large part of what the efficiencies that are going to occur are going to be by these big organizations. I think regulations and the government are going to have to do a lot, just like in the case of the EMR rollout. Of course, there are always roles for companies. You got to be fast and nimble and patient and well-funded. So yeah, I think that it'll be top-down driven.
To add to that, so I think that the EMR is going to be there in 5 years, probably in 10 years. With any luck, there are applications that are being built that integrate with the EMR. And those might have a chance if they can make it better. But if it's not going to integrate or thinks it's going to replace the EMR, forget it. It's just not realistic. So, docs hate the medical record. They hate having to turn away from their patient and spend time doing all that. So if there's something that can make it better for the docs, I mean, there are some voice systems, there are all kinds of things that are being, at least thought of or piloted or whatever, then I think those might have a chance as long as there is some payback for the hospital, because it's all about saving money.
Well, I just to add to that, I can tell you that within a large pharma company like Bayer, and I know from my peers at other companies, it's the same thing. It's not like people don't want to change or adapt new technologies. Actually, there's a strong willingness to do something about it, and lots of colleagues are really engaged in that. But it's just hard, it's hard to move anything in these big companies, and it's also a different culture. A lot of these companies, Bayer is more than 150 years old, there's a lot of legacy, there's legacy systems, there's legacy processes, there's a lot of regulation, obviously, I don't need to tell you that, I guess. But the good news is that there's, I think, two factors. One is that technology is pushed into the healthcare space by the so-called new entrants, the Apples, Googles, Amazon, and so on. And they're just pushing everybody, just the pressure on the traditional healthcare providers and companies is increasing, and that helps actually, And the other thing is that, everybody has now heard about AI and machine learning and deep learning and blockchain. It's just all over the media. You can't open any magazine these days or any blog without reading about it. So even people that try to ignore the new stuff, they have heard about it and they want to know about it. And when I compare the situation, I can talk for Bayer only. 3 years ago, when I started to build up this team here in Mountain View, and back then people were saying, well, what do you want to use with trackers for? Let Apple figure that out. They can play in their corner with it. Compared to today, where it was like, well, we got to have a tracker on every drug that we launch in the future. It's just going to be the new normal, right? So I'm quite positive that change is coming and is getting implemented.
So one of the challenges of health tech companies or health tech startups is they might have unpredictable sales cycles, anywhere from 6 months at a quick sales cycle all the way to 12, 15, 18 months. And given that this is somewhat of a new technology, especially in the healthcare field, any tips or words of wisdom to an entrepreneur to at least explain to their potential investors on what they predict that the sales cycle will be for, you know, a blockchain? You know, I mean, will it add extra months to the sales cycle? And any tips on how to kind of explain that to their investors?
So one of the things we do is we push our teams out to go talk to the marketplace and do interviews to find out all kinds of things. And that is certainly one thing they could go find out, is if, why not sit with some potential investors and say, hey, you know, have you been involved with blockchain? What's your interest in it? What would it take to get a blockchain investment through here? And that's what I base that answer on. I don't have any canned answer. I mean, I think clearly not everyone knows what blockchain's all about, and it's going to take a lot longer to do that kind of a technology sell as well as whatever the application is. So I would add months onto it, but I don't know what that number of months is.
Yeah, I can take the fear of the long sales cycle away, but maybe a bit of a hope is that once you're in there and the sales cycle is completed, you'll be in there for a while, so it will not be easily be replaced later on. That's the conservatism playing out in the right way. But I would look at in the sales cycle to convince the customers by making it easily understandable, but more importantly, making it experiential in some way. So cut out a certain application area, a certain field without too much regulatory risk, and demonstrate what it can do. People can see and feel it, get some trust, because in healthcare, no executive wants to make a big wrong decision. They'd rather not take one.
So what we found is that a lot of the healthcare startups we're working with will have funds that they know of at large institutions, right? Whether it's healthcare providers or pharma companies, they may have their own labs, and they're willing to invest with some of to do projects, right? With some of these startups to understand what's the technology capable of, and so we've seen some of these companies take off initially with some of that investment. And that's not just limited to healthcare companies, right? There are other funds around it. I spoke to some individuals here today who are part of funds that want to invest in these new areas. And it's about coming to market with a new idea, sharing those findings, and then that will get more investment, more interest. Because like one of the panels talked about, there are new ideas. While there's low-hanging fruit, there's definitely new ideas coming out. So it's good to have basically a mix of portfolio, and it's not like any other investment where, or any other business, right, where you have your long-term, your medium-term, and your short-term businesses. The long-term business may be something you go out and you partner with to get from a fund. The short-term business may be something that you can get revenue from more quickly. And that may be from a few partners, channel partners, or a few clients directly, right? So mapping out that strategy is something that we've seen the most effective healthcare companies do around blockchain.
Just a quick comment. I think sales cycles are, of course, important. You know, generally in healthcare, it's long. You know, if you're selling to big organizations, anything that's always long, you know, similar in enterprise sales. But I think the next question you should ask is less the sales cycle, because it's kind of inherent to the business, is more of the scalability. I think that, you know, independent of whether it's blockchain or not, you know, I think there's extra potential, you know, efficiencies with scalability, specifically with blockchain, because if you scale, you're going to get, you know, more efficiencies and, you know, have whatever you're doing. But that's, you know, always an issue. I think the successful companies in digital health so far have been the ones who have been able to scale efficiently with the sales team, with a relatively lean sales team, so that, you know, reflects an investor's view of, you know, what's your ROI, you know, how much do we have to put out, how much do we have to invest for you to become sustainable. So I'd say that, you know, next question should be scalability.
Maybe a quick idea that could be counterintuitive, or feedback from all the investors in the room to tell me whether it's right or wrong. If you are selling not to the healthcare institutions, but to a healthcare player for the integration of your technology into a larger company, the sales cycle for actually adopting the technology in their solutions may be longer than your sales cycle for getting an investment strategically so that now for these high long-term technologies, so that they're invested and they can join the journey with you as a smaller company, rather than to already put it in the field and take the risk there for common topic.
Yeah, I have wanted to add some perspective as well. When you look at some of these technologies, and I believe blockchain is one of them that have a good use case, but they are not necessarily, or they are mostly not the core business of these pharma companies or healthcare providers, but they want these technologies to come to fruition, and they want them to be usable, and they basically would, if they could, they would just try to buy it. But sometimes they require some development, some adoption, and what I've seen successfully deployed in order to address that issue is that these big companies, they partner together. You have like 10, 15 of the biggest companies, they work together with an approach, similar to all boats get floated when the tide comes. Think about if your technology or the use case that you have might lend itself towards such an approach, and maybe you even want to orchestrate that, because that not only do you right away get basically your entire market in one room, but you also even create some sort of pressure amongst these players, because everybody wants to make sure they are part of this. And it's actually, I've seen this very successfully deployed, and that could be also a good pitch to investors.
Yeah, I want to just follow up on that point that you just made and another point earlier about how each region is different. Because I likewise have seen initiatives in certain regions of the country here in the US, and this would be replicated around the world, right? Like in the Midwest, there's a MedHealth consortium that I was a part of, where there was a consortium of providers, insurers, doctors, talking about how they could start a blockchain project together. And because they were regionally close, they had similar goals, then that kind of a project could take off, and it'd be easier to get that through than say, oh, let's start a general, payments initiative across all healthcare payers and providers. So I agree that that's something that could be regionally started. And so if there's any of you who have a region that you want to focus on, I think we'd be very interested in speaking to you about that, because we've seen success in that area and could share best practices.
Any questions from the audience? So, one of the drawbacks that I understand of blockchain and the public ledger is that at this time it might be take a lot of computing power. Do you see that to be a minor issue, or potentially a major issue for some of the, let's say, if the hospitals are the customer embracing these technologies?
Well, I've heard about that. I have to say I'm not deep enough in it to really give an educated answer, but what I heard so much is that there's a lot of developments going on that address exactly that issue. So I'm just going to trust the people that work on that to fix that. So I don't see it as a hurdle really.
Yeah, I personally see it as a major issue if it is like it is today. There's always a comparison to certain countries. I think it goes from Denmark over Nigeria to Romania and so on, which is compared, the energy consumption of the country compared to the energy consumption of blockchain for Bitcoin. I think there's the big scenario. I think the blockchains we will adopt in healthcare will look different and will maybe only use elements of the technology compared to what you need for the cryptocurrencies. So if there are blockchain experts there, I would encourage them to think the technology through and see, okay, which of these elements do I need for my application scenario? And I may be naive there, and maybe you need to have the whole thing, but this mining concept and the complex hashing functions and so on, you can hopefully simplify that for certain applications in healthcare, still protect the application well enough, and maybe not have these disadvantages, but you definitely have to consider that.
Right, yeah, and there are a variety of blockchains. So there are private blockchains, there's public blockchains, and even within the public blockchains, there's been a wide diversity of ones. Yes, Bitcoin is the oldest, the most well-known, but it is the oldest. And so there are many newer blockchains that are coming out that don't require so much computing power, and will be able to scale a lot better than the existing examples that we have today. And those blockchains, we can see when you go to some of the Stanford had a conference, I think just a few months ago, where they talked about all of these newer blockchains.
Can I have a follow-up to that? So you said that computing power of some blockchains is less, but blockchain is the enabling technology, right, of all these. Give the example Bitcoin. So what is the characteristic that makes the computing power requirement suddenly less versus more?
So, so there have been a couple of issues with
Can you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, so the question was, what about the new blockchain technologies enables or reduces the computing power that's required? So there's one of the biggest issues or the biggest sort of complaints about blockchain technology is that it doesn't scale, right? And you look at, oh my gosh, I have all these computers, they're all part of these systems, they're all going to be distributed ledgers. They all have to contain the same amount of data. So as the data increases, that means the load and the size of the systems has to somehow increase as well. And so scalability is a big question, like how are we going to scale if data keeps growing, right? So one of the newer blockchains that's coming out called Mimblewimble addresses that problem because as opposed to Bitcoin, which captures every single record, every single part of every single transaction, right? Mimblewimble says, no, you don't need to do that. I'm basically checking if the inputs equal the outputs and that's it. All the kind of stuff that's in between isn't captured. And you still get a fully validated transaction in the end, but you don't have all of the unnecessary bits of information that, yes, when Bitcoin started, you know, that's what they had, right? But now that they've learned from Bitcoin, they know you don't need all of those pieces. You actually only need this amount, and that's what's going to get captured. And so that addresses that scalability issue. So you don't have, okay, well, I have so many computers now, all of them have to keep adding all this information in perpetuity.
Have you heard of any scenarios where quantum computing is integrated into the blockchain at all?
Yeah, so quantum computing is interesting because it has come up as well. You know, how are we gonna deal with that? And actually, I was talking to somebody from Samsung. I don't know if you're here about that. And it's not an issue now for the blockchain. I haven't heard about it being incorporated, but it definitely isn't an issue if that's where your question is going. Are you talking about it?
Well, not necessarily an issue, but potentially an opportunity.
Yes, so that may be the case. I haven't seen that occur yet. I think where quantum computing is right now is that it's not going to be. So let me start with the issue. So most of the problems that I've heard about, or the challenges, opportunities, you might say about quantum computing, have to do with the fact that, well, quantum computing could break the blockchain, right? So the challenge there is with the reality there is with the blockchain, you have Shor's algorithm, which is a very important piece of the technology, and that requires in quantum computing like 800 qubits, whereas now the current quantum computers only have a few qubits that they can handle. So there is, all I'm saying is there's a ways for quantum computing to catch up to a point where the blockchain would need to deal with it in some way. Is there opportunity? Absolutely. I'm not abreast with all the new developments there, but I'm sure there is opportunity there. Yes.
So within healthcare, when we talk about like public ledgers, which segment will be open with the data to put on a public ledger? Or which part of healthcare will be open to that?
Yeah, maybe one suggestion. So as I understood, the question is what kind of data in healthcare should be made public and be an element of a public ledger?
Be open to it, yeah.
And be made openly available to larger groups. Not sure about fully open, but an area that I've seen, there's a good study from IBM. I've never been employed by IBM, so I can say that IBM blockchain healthcare, you'll find it's a kind of a white paper. They list a couple of application areas. And one I think they mentioned as the first one, the clinical trial data. Now, I mean, there's a couple of challenges there. You would not want to make that totally publicly available, but you could share this more broadly so that this is a database, everybody enters something that runs clinical trials and they get something else out. Theoretically, that's nice because you can then, I mean, like you often do in research, pool studies or many other studies, you can more easily get to a larger pool of data. However, of course, each study is conducted slightly differently. Not all of the data is recorded there, so complications are there. But it would be nice if we had a pool of clinical data easily available in a way that it's robust, trusted, stored nicely. Maybe that's an area.
I would agree, and actually I would even extend it beyond clinical trials. I think, specifically in oncology, there's been some anecdotal benefit to people sharing, clinicians sharing their results. For example, with the new immunotherapies, they found surprisingly that certain types of cancer that were not expected to respond to the immunotherapies have. And this was done not in the setting of a clinical trial, but in just clinical practice, just for compassionate use. So I think there's an opportunity there, but you still have to have that kind of, somebody's got to agree on how to share it. What do you do? What's the protocol? So it's still got to be, organized in some fashion.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're gonna move on to the next stage, and so I want to thank the panelists, and everyone give them a hand.
Thank you, James. I'll be taking over. The panel, please stay. We'll do like our startup pitch now. Just James has another engagement, so he kind of has to run off. So I'm taking over. Feels like it's a little bit too low. My name is Thomas Richter. I'm with One Traction. I'm based out of our LA office. So I'm looking out of startups in the LA area, and I also deal a little bit with the European and German companies. My background is German, in case you haven't figured that much. So for the panelists, I would ask you to, obviously we have a couple of remote pitches, and feel free to give your feedback. Some of you, I see, have done this before, so they know what we're looking for and what the founders are looking for.
Hi, I'm Corey from Hashed. This is the first of a new video series that we're putting together to explore the exciting work that we're doing to bring blockchain solutions to the healthcare industry. In this first video, we're going to address the most common question that we get asked still today, and that's, what is blockchain? We hope this short and non-technical introduction to blockchain can help you understand why we're so excited about the potential for this new technology for our industry. Most simply, a blockchain is a transactional ledger. It records transactions, the movement of anything of value from one party to another. What makes blockchain unique is that it's a distributed ledger, which means a network of transactional partners can share a single copy of the ledger. But rather than having one copy of the ledger held by one centralized party, every transactional entity has their own copy of the ledger. And what's important to understand about blockchain is that the technical architecture solves the reconciliation problem. In other words, all copies of the ledger are in sync and in consensus with each other all the time, which removes the need to reconcile my copy of the ledger and your copy of the ledger, and it takes out inefficiencies in the transacting process. It's also a distributed ledger, which means that when we make a transaction, we broadcast that transaction to a network of transacting parties who all maintain copies of the ledger. Blockchain is a secure transactional layer in that transactions that get recorded in the ledger cannot be changed by any single party. Therefore, it's safe to be distributed among multiple transacting parties. We think that blockchain is a transformational technology for the healthcare industry. It is a technical architecture, not a simple piece of software, but solutions can be built to address the long-standing problems that we're familiar with in the healthcare industry. The fundamental problem in healthcare is called by many different names. On the clinical side, can be termed lack of interoperability, or revenue cycle problems on the payment side, or supply chain problems for the movement of pharmaceuticals and supplies across the healthcare industry. But all of these problems come down to one core issue, and that's transactional inefficiency. In healthcare, it's almost impossible to avoid transactional inefficiency. The provision of even the simplest procedure in healthcare triggers a transactional cascade of administrative transactions between multiple parties and stakeholders to deliver that care to a patient. Let's take prescriptions as an example. A physician writes you a very simple prescription for an antibiotic. Electronically issuing that prescription to you triggers a cascade of back-end administrative transactions before that drug ever reaches your hand. There'll be benefits investigation and eligibility checks to see if your insurance will cover that drug. There might be prior authorization or step therapy requirements to be checked to see if you're able to receive that drug or if other drugs might be preferred. There are formulary checks. There are maybe patient assistance determinations that take place. And then there's the supply chain of whether or not the pharmacy that you want to go to has that drug on hand and whether it's covered by your insurance. All of these administrative transactions take place in isolation from each other. The crucial data or finding from one transaction is not necessarily shared with those other administrative transactions. What this means for the patient is often bizarre and inexplicable delays in what should otherwise be a very simple provision of healthcare. The delivery of a drug. We've all had the experience of waiting in healthcare, whether it's at the doctor's office or the pharmacy. And those delays are mostly associated with transactional inefficiency. Past attempts to solve the problem of transactional inefficiency of healthcare have usually followed one of two routes. Either healthcare enterprises are forced to build brittle, one-off digital connections with transactional partners that often break or are unreliable or simply can't move the data in a secure fashion where it needs to go. Or we move the data through a third party, a middleman, whose sole purpose is to securely move data from point A to point B across the healthcare continuum, adding cost and further inefficiency to these transactional processes. But blockchain can offer us a new path forward. This digital architecture would allow multiple transacting parties in healthcare to securely share a transactional ledger. And when we talk about transaction, we want to get poetic. Transactions can mean the movement of anything of value, whether that's money, data, valuable goods, or high-value assets. It doesn't matter what the transaction is, blockchain can securely communicate the movement of that data, the movement of that digital asset between multiple parties. And because it's a distributed ledger, blockchain allows multiple enterprises to have real-time transparency into the state of these complex healthcare transactions. Whether it's a pharmaceutical contract to move drug from manufacturer to distributor to retail pharmacy, or whether it's a complex document like a medical claim, which requires a range of data, both from the health system side and from the insurance side, or whether or not it's simply a matter of getting your medical records from one provider to another provider, without resorting to the ubiquitous fax machine in healthcare. Blockchain becomes that common transactional layer that sits between multiple transacting enterprises, and it takes out a lot of the inefficiencies and pain points that we all experience in the delivery of healthcare. We are excited about the potential for blockchain applications in healthcare. It's early days still, though, and we are hard at work developing solutions. We encourage you to visit hashedhealth.com to learn more about the use cases that we're building right now and to get more information on how your enterprise can get involved in the blockchain revolution.
Is that supposed to be a pitch? Is that supposed to be a pitch? Yeah, that's my feedback. I still know what on earth he does. Yeah.
So Corey, listen, any other feedback from Corey from the panel?
I mean, it's kind of like boiling the ocean. I mean, when I see that, it's like, wow, you're gonna, if you were starting, you know, the country of hashed healthopia, sure, you could do that. I mean, I would say, well, if all the parties, I mean, just taking the drug example, you know, if everybody agreed, then, you know, why not just create a standard and then, you know, who makes money from that, right? Like if everybody, if Optum Health, Caremark, and all the pharmacy benefit and the drug companies and insurance companies were able to get together and agree on doing this, I mean, they should just agree and create a consortium like, you know, all the multiple technical consortiums that have been developed. And they would just agree and they would run their own servers and it would be distributed and great. But you know, the hardest part is to get them to agree, and they really don't have any incentive to do that. I mean, you know, I've worked with pharmacy benefit managers and it's, you know, they make money from selling drugs. They don't really care that the patient's waiting. Actually, a lot of them like that the patient's waiting because they make more money from the patient who waits. So there's the reason the pharmacist is in the back of the room It's the same reason convenience stores have milk in the back. It's because they want you to go through all the other places and buy stuff while you're waiting, and that works really well for them. And they don't have much competition. There's CVS and there's Walgreens. That's it, pretty much, right, in the country. So, you know, I don't see a huge incentive for them to pay somebody to do this.
I just didn't see, I saw that as a lecture on blockchain with, throughout a few applications of healthcare, didn't tell us what he's working. So I don't think it was a grand idea about we should all work together or anything. I think they just don't have any focus.
I agree, I was just interpreting, I was giving them the benefit of the doubt of what I thought they were trying to say. But I agree, it wasn't really a pitch, I agree.
Are they listening?
I'm not sure, but we will get them the feedback, and I think your feedback was very helpful, and hopefully they'll think about it. I'd like to move on. Our next startup pitch is Joanna, and she's actually here in person. So please take it away. I just tried to do like a speech.
Fine, free speech. Hi. So I am Joanna Strober, and I am the founder of the BMI token. And we are developing a token platform that will pay people to lose weight, prevent diabetes, and get healthier. Over 80% of all healthcare costs are rooted in obesity, which makes helping people lose weight actually a huge opportunity. 4 years ago, when I founded a company called Kurbo, we licensed a program from Stanford and turned it into an interactive mobile app. Today, over 200,000 people use that app and engage with our team of expert coaches. The results are amazing, and over 88% of the people using Kurbo lose weight. We're thrilled that some of the largest and most knowledgeable buyers of healthcare are choosing to work with us, from the US Army to the government of Singapore to companies like Pepsi and SAP. But with all weight loss programs, not just ours, there's a big challenge of motivating healthy behavior and getting that behavior to continue. Research has long shown that actually paying people to lose weight works. And our employers that we work with, they already do this. Many of them actually have started to compensate people to lose weight because they have seen that it's actually an effective process. However, what they are asking us for something is to build something that is applicable across platforms, across employers, and that can actually reward people more effectively. So enter blockchain. With blockchain, you can have borderless micropayments. You can have profile portability, so when they move from one place to another or one company to another, you don't lose your data. You can have verified data, I'll talk more about that later, and incentive alignment. So what our BMI platform is going to do is actually pay you to lose weight. People will be rewarded for small changes that we can validate, exercise and losing weight, creating a kind of personal health passport on the blockchain, a record of behaviors and weight that's portable and verifiable. We will basically create a marketplace where verifiers, like doctors, personal trainers, drugstores, will get BMI tokens for validating things like weight loss, cholesterol, and exercise, and recording them on the blockchain. BMI tokens will be rewarded for healthy behaviors, such as losing weight, eating healthier, and exercise. Insurers can reward healthy behaviors with discounts on your premiums, and brands can advertise and provide products to people who live healthier lives. Ultimately, we want to create a world where people who are healthy are actually compensated for saving society money. The JP Morgan CEO, Jamie Dimon, talks about how obesity-related illness is crippling our society, suggesting the government should give tax incentives for being healthy. Singapore is actually considering this, and the BMI token will enable this. We have a really experienced team with advisors ranging from Susan Wojcicki, who's the CEO of YouTube, behavior change scientists at Cornell and Stanford, and experts in the insurance world who are all joining us to work together. Our BMI platform brings together behavior change expertise with blockchain technology to revolutionize how we motivate people to eat right, exercise, and prevent chronic disease. We have the opportunity to change the world for the healthier.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the panel?
So is your value proposition that it is less the blockchain, it's the aspect of people moving from company to company as opposed to just losing weight. Because you could lose weight incentives without blockchain.
You can, but what we have, so here's what we've learned. Number one, we work with companies like Pepsi, and and they will give you a discount on your insurance, right? But when you leave and you go someplace else, you lose that discount.
Yeah.
So there's no portability of that data, and that is what blockchain will enable. The other issue is the verification. And a lot of people that we've talked to, in order to really make this work so that when you can show your insurance company or life insurance is really interested in this, they would like proof of weight loss, and they actually, the discussions that we're having seem to be that if we can get like doctors, or we're talking to Walmart about becoming a verifier, if we can get verified weight.
Yeah, so what's the incentive for the verifier?
We'll give them tokens too, in order to
For
so that
what?
they can go shopping on the platform and get the same discounts, not on insurance, but on the other branded products that we will have on the platform that you can get discounts for. So we're talking to companies, a bunch of large companies that would be interested in giving discounts on our platform, and that's one of the ways that we'll make money is through advertising them. And those discounts would be available to the verifiers for the tokens that they get.
Is this a separate company, or is this just a product in your existing company? That's what it makes it seem like when you presented it, that it's sort of it's a product in your company that you already have running.
So for a number of legal purposes, we will be a separate B corporation as opposed to part of Curbo. Curbo will become one of the providers on the platform. You can use the tokens that you get in order to get Curbo coaching. But the way that we envision this rolling out, you can use the tokens over time. We'd like you to be able to use them for Weight Watchers. We'd like you to be able to use the tokens that we're creating on this platform.
But Curbo's going to let you work with their customers. So you already have an established customer base through Curbo. You have an agreement with Curbo to do that? Or you have to still approach each customer individually?
Curbo will continue working with all those companies. What some of those companies have asked us for and what we're creating is a blockchain-based incentive system that will pay you to lose weight.
Yeah, the reason I ask is that, this type of business, this really falls within the wellness category in terms of the employer benefit. And there are some people that have been successful, some that have not, and it's really a sales-driven business, and the successful ones are basically, because every program says they work, and they all work to a certain degree, and people pick and choose which company they want to work with. But the hardest part really is sales. It's not so much that, it's interesting, one of the residents, she used to be CMO of Vita, and she came back to residency because she's like, can't deal with this anymore. But they were successful, they raised a lot of money, and they're in a lot of companies. But she made the same observation I did. It's not so much about the product. You don't necessarily. There's always ways to fool the system. Apple, for example, I had dinner with a friend of ours. They're having right now. I don't know if anybody works at Apple. They've got like 60,000 people doing an activity competition, right, with the Apple Watch. And it's so funny, everybody's clever, everybody figures out a way to game the system, right? They got the watch on, they put 2 watches on, so I'm a big believer in human ingenuity. I think, there are ways, for example, if I have an incentive to get tokens for validating, I'm sure there are gonna be some bad actors there who are gonna be like, well, I'll just validate a whole bunch, I get tokens, they're happy, I'm happy, so to me that seems to be your value proposition over any other incentive method without blockchain. So I'm just a little bit skeptical that, one, for example, me, I would care about validating. I mean, I will sign a paper and write somebody's cholesterol already, and people get, at Stanford, you get $400 if you go get your blood test. And
so that's actually why people want to validate, right? So we talked to Walmart, they want people to come into their centers. So if they have a deal with us where they become official validators, then they're getting people to come into their program. So that's actually a benefit for them. It's actually one of the reasons why the validators are interested. But you know what? If you lie and you've actually gone to the doctor and you're showing weight, then that's actually something we would be happy about, not necessarily worried that you'd be cheating to get the extra 2 cents that you'd get in the micropayment from cheating.
Sure, and then, so who is providing the money, the benefits for the block? Because that's the biggest thing with these incentive programs is that,
right.
Who's paying, like for example, honestly, I went to this with a company I work with, they were selling a wellness program or, health management program, digital health. And, a lot of companies sign up for these programs, honestly, they know, I think, I agree, there's lots of evidence showing paying people to do some things in health works, But all the wellness programs have not shown any benefit, and companies offer them basically because it makes their employees happy. That's why. That's why they do it, and it incentivizes them. They're like, oh, my company cares about me. So, what's
So I don't think that's completely true. I hate to contradict you, but the government of Singapore is paying for every child to do Kerbo because they've actually proven that we're getting weight loss results for the kids. And they've actually asked us to develop this for them because they want an incentive
So
system.
I agree. I'm working with a company called iHealth. They were hired by the government of Singapore. So I agree. I think governments and single payers have an incentive. Whether the evidence is going to be there or not, that will pan out in the end. I think most companies are not so forward thinking. For example, Livongo, which is probably the most successful company in the kind of employer-based space, their outcomes have not shown significant benefit. You could argue about that, but it's one of those things where people offer it because there are these other incentives. So I'm just saying that it's great if you're already in with a company you've already sold this, secondarily. So that's great. I think that's a good thing. I think that if you're starting from scratch, that would be tough. That's my only point.
That's why I'm telling you that we use the 4 years of experience we already have with our customers to get them to move on to the blockchain.
I have a follow-up to my first question on value proposition. What % of the employee population moves every year?
A lot, actually.
What does that mean?
So we've been
20%?
talking to the people who actually run something like this in South Africa, run by Discovery. And what they've been saying actually is that millennials are moving every 2 years, and they actually have a big issue. So for example, if you're using their program and you go to a different company or to a different country, you lose everything in their program.
I understand, but you're talking ex-US. I presume US is a major market for you, or?
US is a major market for us,
so
but they don't work here. I got this data from them, but also from one of our large investors, which is an insurance company. They were saying that millennials are leaving their jobs every 2 years. It's a problem for them.
Do you know what percentage?
I don't know what
of the
percentage, I'm
workforce?
sorry.
Because your value proposition is predicated on valuing portability, and I'm just
Well,
curious
portability and
to
verification, that's right, both.
wonder what % of the population actually needs portability. So it'd be an
Yeah.
interesting statistic for you to gather.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Any
So
question?
I had a comment and a question. So if you need statistics on that, I can help you get that. I do have some friends who work in that space and do a lot of polls in that area. My question was more on the technology side. So very interested in hearing about the verification aspect. Do you have a way of authenticating the verifier? Just like we were going back
Yeah.
to, is there a way that you can say that this Walmart, whoever it is not the cheapest system, but is actually someone or a machine or something that can take the weight.
So we're looking at building that. That's the part we haven't done yet. We do understand how we can do it and how we can use the blockchain. The only thing we're going to really use the blockchain for is for storing the weights, because that's the one thing that can truly be verified. Everything else can actually be stored off blockchain. But we're going to store the weights, which is what people are caring the most about on the blockchain, and we will get, you'll be identified on the blockchain as having the app that actually does the verification. But we're building that now. So we have a verifier app that we're close to. We're not quite done with that. Yeah, well, you look skeptical again.
Oh, no. It's, go ahead.
The part I would be curious about is the exact financials, so the inflow and the outflow, also the size of the incentive, because if it's too micro, it may not move anything. If it's too large, you go into this gaming thing. Okay, now it's really useful to game
Yeah.
thing. And as a recommendation, and I may just have missed it, but in the list of things that you want to check compliance for, I would include medication compliance for seniors. In some
Yeah. So I think the challenge is what is stored on blockchain and what's off blockchain, right? Because medication compliance is great, but it's hard to verify. It's important, but we want to focus on what we actually can verify, which is really weight. And then over time, you could do blood, you could do diabetes, you could do blood and weight, but otherwise it's harder to verify.
How are you setting the weight goals?
We are going to let people set their own goals, but our goal is to get you into a healthy BMI category.
Okay, so if they, for example, if I say I'm going to lose 2 pounds, I'll get some incentive, but if I say I'm going to lose 10 pounds, I get more incentive?
So you'll get different amounts based on, we have some behavior change people at Cornell who are putting this together for us and figuring out how much you need to give people from each reward in order to get people to keep going. The truth is, so if you work with John Hancock. John Hancock will give you a 30% discount if you have a healthy weight and you exercise a certain amount. They'll give you a monthly discount, a premium each month. They don't care if you've lost the weight, they just care that you're getting to that healthy weight and you're not overweight, right? So we will be able to reward you based on being at a healthy weight. It's not necessarily, we're gonna get you to hopefully get there and then maintain that.
So I would just encourage you, there's a great meta-analysis, I think it's maybe a Cochrane review, that basically looked at a ton of weight loss programs. And the typical weight loss, I mean, for an effective weight loss program, typical weight loss is about 5 to 7 pounds.
Right. The goal is 5% for adults, right? If you can lose 5% of your pounds, right?
Pounds, not
Yeah, no, I
percent.
understand. The goal, though, to get someone healthier is 5% of their.
Well, it depends on where they start, right? That is not,
Right.
doesn't have to do with percentage. You have to look at where they started and how much they lost. So I'm just saying that, you know, most effective weight loss programs, a successful one is 5 to 7 pounds. You could be a 200-pound person and go to 195. So, you know, just keep that in mind in terms of the realities of weight loss. Even with incentives, most people do not lose a ton of weight. There was just a study done at Stanford where they looked and encouraged people to lose weight by having a healthy diet, and they asked them not to track their calories. They said, well, eat, and it made the New York Times, you know, eat healthy, and there was a low-carb group and a low-fat group. And even that, you know, again, very sub 10 pounds. So just keep that in mind when you're engineering your incentives, because, you know, if you're making the incentives too strong, I mean, I run into this every day. Oh yeah, get to BMI, and I'll tell you your response. Oh, well, how much do oh, your BMI goal, you should be at 160, right? The most common response is like, I haven't been 160 since I was in high school, you know? So I think, you know, the challenge is if your goal is a healthy BMI, if that's the insurance company's goal, that's tough. It's just tough. We don't know how to solve that, right?
Yeah, so Stanford's actually publishing a report on our data of thousands of kids that actually shows we're getting clinical weight loss from our program. So it is possible.
I'm not saying clinical weight loss, again, is 5 to 7 pounds, not to a healthy BMI. So if your customer's an insurance company and they want you to get a normal BMI before they'll get you a discount, that's a tough haul for the vast majority of people who have weight issues.
There's a guy with a question there. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the weights are going to be stored on the blockchain. How do you deal with confidentiality?
So we are HIPAA compliant already, and we are working on it so that when you show the weight to someone, it won't be attached to you. You will only choose who you want to share it with, and that way you
But
will.
if it's on the blockchain, right?
Yes, is it public? Yes. So when it's stored on the blockchain, it won't be attached to your name.
Okay, but there's going to be some sort of identifier that somebody needs to decode.
Yes, that's right, and we'll be able to do that.
And so it'll be a centralized index of the identifiers and the names.
Yes, that's what we're looking at. Because there's a lot of HIPAA issues too, so we want to make it so you can share with whoever you want to. And so we're working on that. It's one of the blockchain challenges we're looking
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
The study shows hardly 1% of the people who lost weight maintain that lower weight.
Yeah.
So what happens if they gain back the weight? They pay back the incentive?
I think that's a really good question. Our goal is to continue to pay you to stay at the lower weight. There is actually some behavioral science of people who have done that research that aversion to gaining weight, if you could pay them for that, might work as well. And there's some research on that, but we haven't figured that out. So no, we will not charge you for gaining the weight back.
All right, thank you. Oh, one more comment, or one more comment, please. You gotta move on.
Yeah, so one more quick comment. So in terms of the verifying technology, I just wanted to say, we could talk about this later. You could use the blockchain to also verify that data, right? So that goes back to some of the discussions we had earlier around the Internet of Things and using devices to communicate with your verifying device. And that's something that could greatly simplify and also enhance your value proposition.
Okay, that's tough. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you, panel. We'll have another remote session. We have Laila from revivemed.com.
Revivemed is a precision medicine platform that uses data from metabolites for small molecules like glucose or cholesterol. Metabolites are the closest link to the health of an individual that show the genetic or environmental effects. But identifying a large set of metabolites for each patient is constantly slow until now. ReviveMed's machine learning platform.
Please come talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
That was quick. Sorry. It was a very quick pitch.
Metabolomic data into the right therapeutics for the right patients.
Hi, I'm Leila, founder and CEO at ReviveMed. At ReviveMed, we unlock the value of metabolomics. 1 in 5 Americans are affected by fatty liver. It has no treatment. These patients are suffering from devastating complications like liver cancer or liver failure. In the other hand, there are thousands of existing drugs developed spending trillions of dollars in R&D. For example, drugs for diabetes or obesity, they may have therapeutic effects for fatty liver, but we don't know. This is just one example. There are thousands of diseases with no treatment. If we could figure out which one of the existing drugs could work for which one of these patients, we can save millions of lives. To solve this puzzle, in the last decade, machine learning algorithms have developed. The majority of these algorithms are using data from DNA and RNA. But DNA and RNA is really far from what we observe in a disease symptom. Downstream DNA, there are over 40,000 small molecules named metabolites. They are closest to a disease and they tell you exactly what has happened in a disease. Now, at ReviveMed, we are able to use metabolomics to solve this puzzle. Thank you. This was possible because our team at MIT has spent over 5 years developing a pioneering machine learning algorithm. Our patent-pending technology was published in Nature Methods. Our proprietary database and machine learning reduces the need for costly and slow processes to identify metabolites, enabling us to leverage 40 times more metabolomic data than any other platforms. We have proven our platform to discover drugs. In Huntington disease that has no treatment, we were able to identify and validate new disease mechanisms, novel therapeutic target, existing drugs with therapeutic effects for Huntington disease. ReviveMed creates value for both patients and pharma. We plan to use our platform to identify therapeutic leads for metabolic diseases with $55 billion market opportunity. Because we are leveraging existing drug assets, we are saving hundreds of millions and years in R&D. We then capture this value by licensing out our therapeutic leads to larger pharma company or develop them in partnership, generating revenue from upfront and milestone payments. We have already established our market. Since May, we have launched 4 revenue-generating pilot projects with leading biotech and pharma company, including a top 5 pharma company. We are also in the latest stage negotiation with a few more companies, including another top 5 pharma company. This will further establish our value proposition. Working with more data, our technology gets better and better, and we are building relationships with this company for future partnership opportunities. Focus on discovering therapeutics for fatty liver. Because as I told you guys earlier, there is significant needs for patients. Importantly, metabolites play a key role in fatty liver, so our technology can create the most impact. The market for fatty liver therapeutics is going to be the next breakout in the biotech market. Right now, 60 million of Americans are affected. The market size is estimated to reach by over 35 billion by 2025. The increasing rate of obesity and diabetes have been driving the market. Our team has complementary skills and passion to unlock the value of metabolomics. I invented this technology during my PhD here at MIT. DeMarcus is an experienced data scientist. He has been coding since he was 12. And Richard has over 30 years of experiences in biotech and pharma. In addition to our awesome team, we have world-class advisors from MIT, Broad Institute, and Fortune 500 pharma companies. They are leaders in metabolomics and computational biology field. Our team has received several entrepreneurship prizes and awards. Just this summer, we were a top 10 finalist for Google machine learning competition. We were also received highly prestigious Lab Central Golden Ticket Award. At Revivement, we are passionate about transforming metabolomic data into the right therapeutics for the right patients. We are looking for exceptional computational biologists to join our exceptional team. Please come talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
Any feedback from the panel for Leila?
On December 1st, 2016, I woke up,
Where was the blockchain?
Yeah.
I think they picked the wrong pitch.
Maybe from the other panelists, regardless of the fact that, I was wondering about the same question as well, but in general, do you find any feedback?
You know, it was just a sort of a classic pitch. It goes exactly according to the outline you're supposed to do. She did a nice job of doing that. She didn't tell us very much about what they're actually doing. I would never talk about deals that were maybe going to happen someday. That's a no-no. Yeah, she did a nice job, but it's a generic pitch, and there wasn't too much there to grab onto. Also, don't know what her milestones were and what, how much money she was going to need to accomplish those value inflection points. So she could use a little more coaching.
All right, excellent, thank you. We'll have time for one more pitch before we move on. We have Chris from Who Knows.
Today, I'm tasked with staffing a mobile initiative for headquarters in Silicon Valley. When I type in Android, Who Knows immediately returns 3 recommendations of individuals in the network. This time I need additional power to conduct my research, so I turn to Who Knows dedicated search in the drop-down menu under my account. I type Android into the search window, and the same individuals are recommended. The first thing I can do is see where they are all located. I click on the map view and immediately see they are all located near Toronto in Canada. With Who Knows search, I can filter to get deeper levels of granularity, by location, by department, title, name, connection, and type. This time when I conduct a dedicated search under iOS, the map view shows me the recommendations are all located in the San Francisco Bay Area. So when I switch over to the list view, I immediately select Joe Elwell. I've heard he's a highly reputable mobile developer, and he's also close to my office. I'm going to send him a message now. Mission accomplished.
What? Oh, who knows? I'm puzzled how this connects to healthcare.
Sorry, just clarification, to be fair to you guys and this entrepreneur, these are all disrupting the healthcare. That's what they're doing. Now, some they do have publicly released info about blockchain, some are working on it, and that's why it isn't covered. But they're all trying to solve the biggest challenge within healthcare. Okay, so blockchain, as all of you know, is very new. They are very, very skillful people. So please right now with all the buzz outside, they're not at stage to release the actual product. But again, because this session is about healthcare and blockchain is more the underlying technology. Okay, so we also, the session will end at 3:30. We're gonna add perhaps as much as possible because you will see how diversified the startup. Sorry, I just want to say something about this video. Actually went so fast. Who knows? It's a startup. Obviously, everything happens slightly last minute. But actually, this specifically startup is very, very promising at 3 levels. Number one of the key investors is Andreessen Horowitz. Number two, the team are both Stanford and Ivy School with 10 years experience deep on technical side of healthcare. And number three, they are right between what Dr. Brian covered and the whole panel covered about what situation in healthcare, okay? And then the blockchain which is coming. They're trying to make it slightly more efficient than today without the line. So I highly recommend, go check their website, read more. It's very, very promising. They're already working with the top pharma. It's on their website, okay? So next one, I believe it should be here. It's actually again a bunch of Stanford MDs, also Stanford Technology, very promising. John, are you here in a building? If you are, come please. Let's give him 30 seconds. And if not, you can go read about it. It is Aviv Pharma. It's again disruptive. That's the least I can say. Okay, so you're not here. Now we're going to go the other side of the world. We're going to go to China. These are a team of scientists and MDs solving one of the major issue on Asian Pacific from nutrition side using about non-medical, we call them a solution, mostly IoT. Let's see what they get.
Antibiotic residue in mainland of China. Antibiotic residue in mainland of China is 7.5 times of Europe. Every adult in China consumes 5 kilograms aquatic medications in average each year. You don't even know what you have eaten. You don't even know what you have cultivated. The more concerned, the more terrifying. Therefore, China government proposed 13 5-year policy. A quarter of aquatic products will be exempt. Every unqualified crowd will be shut down. Do you have any measurement? Cell aqua technology solved the problem from 4 aspects: secondary pollution, water purification, disease control, and feed management.
我几代人也是养鱼，到我这一代已经有30多年，我们也研发了一套比较所可以说能接受也是比较健康的一套技术，让我们都用中草药。然而看到，当你有病，除了中草药以外呢，就靠碳水。这个套方法说实话不错，非常量的。现在水源性的短缺，满足不了我们，一直不敢提升那个产量。当该死的时候，我有一个词，我的鱼出问题了。通常这种情况，我就用我自己方法来处理。然后我就一直想着，先上去开个2审来，它肯定有它的作用，所以我就完全的放手，给他去处理。2个年轻人去处理这一期，我们已经做了有半年左右嘛，会用滴滴的一套非常先进的一套技术，发现可以哦，操作不难。我们以前的方法的费用虽然多了一点点，然后它真的能够把它的病治好，这一套很明显就把问题改善，而且还安全。挺感恩上帝派了天使来。
We hope we can establish toxic-free fish ponds all over the world. Provide healthy food for everyone. To make the world healthier and happier. New aquaculture era needs your precipitate.
Now we're going to open it to the panelists, and just for disclosure, this is a live stream feed. So each presenter, they can see from around the world what's going on. They cannot talk back, they cannot reply to a question to our email. So feel free to share positive, negative feedback to Silaka.
I mean, from my experience working in China, definitely it's a good idea, especially if you have backing from the government. I think that's the key in China, is you have to be, have a fairly good relationship with both the provincial government and the national government for this type of thing, if they're using this as sort of a certificate, stamp of approval. I definitely, I'm not sure how much of it's due to water versus, exogenous people giving fish antibiotics. I mean, it's definitely a big problem even in the U.S., so I think it's a good thing for public health.
How are you guys involved in blockchain stuff?
Oh, they're not yet. Good question. So mainly the technology, they were actually here in San Francisco. We did the previous event at Google, so they were here actually covering that question specifically. Again, because blockchain is so new right now, the product has many IoT, but it will evolve to blockchain. Some of you who are not technical, as an engineer, I will tell you very simplistic how blockchain, because right now there's a lot of mystery about it. Blockchain is about two words: automating the trust, whether data, people, transaction. That's you.
Well, I've got some stuff. I'm not sure we're going to get it. It's the other room. You have a large network.
We cannot hear you. Are you in the room, please?
That's the other room.
I think it's just feedback from the other room. You had that this morning.
Yeah.
It's like there could be wires across.
Yeah, okay, let's move on because we have a lot to cover. Okay, panelists, we're done. Okay, let's move on next one. This one is slightly different. It is local. Steve, are you here? He's in San Francisco, last minute change again. So brief overview about this company, also equally promising. Steve is a Stanford GSB, expert on healthcare, very powerful team, and I believe the folks, they're trying to solve the heart disease. That's the folks. So let's see what they get. And again, for Stephanie make a very valid point. So the purpose for this startup is less about pitching for typical investment. It's more about disruptive raw package. And that's why they have, like the first one took 50 minutes, etc. So we're not doing typical classic VC pitching. It's really about innovation, what you have, and let the world hear about it. All right, unfortunately this one here, last minute change, I don't have a video yet, so you can read an overview about what they're trying to solve. And feel free to comment on it.
Do you know if they have any clinical data yet?
I'm sorry, repeat?
Do you know if they have any clinical data yet?
I know they're fully funded, they're in progress, but I don't have that information. I cannot answer that. So here, just maximize for you, doctors, you can read. But they have, again, several deals with large pharma as we speak. So, but besides that, I leave it to Steve to answer that question. And then we'll cover briefly the product, and then we'll move on. All right, please, any input from the panel?
Yeah, very high level. I mean, it sounds good. So the measurements are relevant. If you can do it better than other systems, low power is fine, wearable. high level sounds good. There's many others. If it differentiates, which we can't really analyze right now, then I would say go ahead. So you need to convince the clinical people that it gives the signals that are conclusive.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, I mean, due to the fact that in recent years there has been a lot of progress in stroke handling, which leads to the fact that there's more and more patients that survive. You know, that's a good thing. It leads, however, also to the fact that more and more people have heart failure because a stroke just leads to you know, some damage in the heart, and therefore it's at least the right area that they're in. I mean, it doesn't say much about what exactly they're doing, and I'm going to check it out in more detail.
Awesome, thank you guys. Steve, hopefully you're listening. You took a note. If not, we'll coordinate. Thank you so much. Let's move on to the next one. Now we're going to go to Arizona. LP founder.
Epifinder is a software application which is being used by physicians, doctors, and alike in the hospitals so that they can effectively diagnose patients who are suffering from epilepsy. So how they do it is that they open an app, they input patient signs and symptoms, and it maps to an artificial intelligence-led algorithm on the back end and connects that with the most likely epilepsy the patient might have. And this helps, and this drastically reduces the time it takes to come up with the right type of epilepsy syndrome at the point of care. I was doing my graduate education in biomedical informatics at Arizona State University, and I saw pretty cool research coming out of the labs. So back in those days, I was very fortunate to meet my current co-founder slash business partner, Robert Yao, who had this amazing idea of detecting epilepsy in patients. So we teamed up together. That was back in 2014. It's been like 2.5 years. We grew our team from just 2 of us to about 18 team members, both full-time, part-time, and student interns. And we are trying to help patients to live healthier, happier, and have a better life.
Okay, awesome. Any input from the panel?
Question is he targeting the international market or domestic?
Local. They're already working with, I believe, Cleveland.
of Enterprise Student Entrepreneur Award is Epifinder Inc.
So I'm wondering, I'll defer to my clinical colleague on the panel, wondering how clinicians feel about going through a menu of symptoms that they should know.
Yeah, I mean, this is you know, there's a gazillion checklists for various diseases. It's a product. It could be a website. You know, I can point to many calculators and, you know, decision support tools. So at most, it's a product. It doesn't absolve you from doing an EEG, which is a gold standard. So, you know, I don't see it as a company. It's at most a product.
So to answer your question, Stephanie, in fact, I know they're working with Mayo Clinic. I believe both clinical customer, they have strong relationship with that. Okay, plus other.
I would just say maybe a lot of pushback from the clinical side. You know, if it were global and they were going to low-resource countries that just didn't have the kind of training we have, I see that kind of checklist being more useful, but not here with you.
Awesome. So Robert, hopefully you're listening what Stephanie said. Now we can move to New York. So actually, he's supposed to be here today, but last minute he's in New York City. Hopefully, Mike, you're listening. So this one here, I believe, is not the video. Let's see. Ah.
Good afternoon, my name is Michael Ballard. I'm the President and CEO of Align, as I've been introduced, and I want to thank Keith and Koldev for inviting us to be here. This is actually the first public presentation we've ever made on behalf of the company, so I'm very excited to finally be able to tell our story, and hopefully we can get started here right now. Align's mission is to harness the energy of lasers and ultrasound to provide absolute, minimally invasive, gentle restoration of the natural functions of the human eye in order to improve or repair several different and pervasive ophthalmic disorders. We're headquartered in Northern California, very near Stanford University, and we have completed our first round of funding, and we're in the process of raising additional funds on a convertible debt basis. The company was formed in June of 2015 to develop and commercialize about a decade's worth of research that led up to the formation of the company. So there are two technologies that we're based on, and both of them specifically treat the ocular tissues and make modifications of the ocular tissues, and this was really where this research resulted. And the first one we call STEAM, and no good technology is without its acronym, so scleral translocation elastic alignment modulation. This is an ultra minimally invasive laser thermal keratoplasty, and it's a no-cut, no-implant mid-stroma treatment. It's anatomically restorative. We use a chilled sapphire contact lens to protect the adjacent tissues, and the tissue temperature and the depth of the treatment is controlled very precisely, and we're able to stay below the college of denature point. So OcuSon is the name we've given to the second technology, which is the high-intensity focused ultrasound. It's a non-thermal cavitational ultrasound and has a precise liquefaction and fractionization effect, which we've coined spongification, because new technologies, you have to invent new vocabulary sometimes to describe them. So understanding what does it mean, so we can make all these modifications to the tissues, what does exactly that mean? Well, we can soften and restore the elasticity of tissues, which gives us an increased amplitude of motion. We can firm and shrink tissues, which help us to translocate target anatomies. We can blend the two of them in sort of a three-dimensional repositioning of targeted anatomical structures, and then we can liquefy and fractionate the spongification notion that I've just discussed. So what does all that mean? Well, it turns out that if you take a look at a wide range of indications, there are a number of different things that we can treat with these techniques. And we've developed a deep pipeline of these treatments, all of which have been carefully protected from an IP standpoint. We have a very good oversight from Wilson Sonsini. And we're here really today to announce what we call G-STEAM. What we hope to install is the first new line of defense for glaucoma.
This animation depicts all three of the primary outflow obstructions, widely agreed to be at the center of glaucoma's presentations. The three primary obstructions are the closed angle between the iris root and the trabecular meshwork, the presence of the open-angle blockage of the trabecular meshwork Schlemm's canal complex, and the loss of vacuole porosity and blockage of the outflow through the uveal scleral pathways. Regardless of the type of glaucoma, these primary outflow pathways are the common culprits preventing balanced, healthy outflow and normal intraocular pressure. In the presence of a closed-angle iris root, the G-STEAM treatment gently heats the collagen deep within the scleral stroma and the extreme peripheral corneal stroma, shrinking the tissue above the base of the iris root in the area of the limbus in a 360-degree pattern. As the scleral tissue pulls up and away from the insertion point of the iris root, the iris levers open and its convex surface flattens. The iris root's obstructive compression of the trabecular meshwork and the path to the Schlemm's canal and collector channels is now relieved. At this point, we see the iris presented in the open-angle position, and we can better see the trabecular meshwork Schlemm's canal complex. In the primary open-angle glaucoma patient, rather than being obstructed by the iris root, the complex is found in a flow-resistant, congested condition. In this circumstance, the G-STEAM treatment similarly heats the scleral stroma and the extreme peripheral corneal stroma, again using a 360-degree pattern. The Schlemm's canal dilates and the trabecular meshwork is stretched, resulting in improved outflow through this complex of drainage mechanisms. Unlike the trabecular outflow route, the uveoscleral outflow route is not a distinctive pathway with tubes and channels. Rather, it is a route whereby aqueous humor seeps through, around, and in between tissues. The lack of a well-defined structural pathway has given this route the label unconventional outflow pathway. The G-steam treatments in this collective area soften and relax these tissues, improving general porosity and opening sclerovacuoles. When complete, the G-steam treatments will have produced a combination of aqueous outflow improvements that serve to restore the natural biomechanical mechanisms of a balanced, normal tensioned eye.
So you can see in these OCT images of pig eye studies, you can see the pre-op angle, you can see how the angle is open, you can see where the Schlemm's canal would be, at least that it's dilated in this space, and that the intrastromal scleral vacuoles have opened up in those pictures. And so we're all about opening up the three primary outflow pathways, and our objective is ultimately to become the first line of defense for glaucoma, and the notion of dropping the drops. So all of our engineering work is done in companionship with a company called Modulite out of Tampere, Finland. We're currently involved in clinical studies beginning with LV Prasad in India and in Greece as well. And we'd like to give thanks especially to a number of our advisors and investigators who've been working over a number of years with us in the development of these technologies. Thank you very much.
So we can open it to the panelists. Mike, you're listening. So any positive, negative feedback?
If Mike is listening, I just wanted to know that I'm not an optho, and I really understood almost nothing of, I wasn't sure who you were trying to communicate with or who the target audience was, but you know, it would have been great to have it at a more higher level description so we understood what the benefits of the technology were rather than the technology in depth.
I mean, this is kind of a standard traditional med tech type company. You know, there's reimbursement there, a lot of competition. You know, it's a high clinical risk, in my opinion, that, you know, you're not going to be any different than any of the other interventional treatments out there. And it's, you know, as I remember I was hearing the guys who started Ardian speak, and it's hard to beat meds. Meds are easy. Put a couple eye drops in, you don't have to do anything. You don't worry about somebody having a laser near your eye. So that's a big ask to change the standard of care to an interventional procedure from something which is, you know, medically managed right now. So, you know, I would say, you know, they may get great clinical data, but there's a high clinical risk there.
Question here. Just, can you talk about the rest of the program for the afternoon? Because it's a couple that's nothing to do with blockchain.
You're 30 seconds away from that.
There's nothing to do with blockchain, so do we have...
We already covered that. You're 30 seconds from that. Okay. Just be patient. Panelists, anything else? Okay, so we're going to thank our distinguished panelists. Give them an awesome upload. Thank you so much. And thanks for the wonderful entrepreneur who halfway here, halfway there, who pitch, okay? And thanks to you for coming here. So now we're going to make an announcement. What's the next step? Okay? Yeah, we're offline right now. Yeah, so next step is we have two programs tonight. So the next one, it is 4 p.m.